Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Vinod. I head the technology services at Attune and based out of Bangalore. Been with Attune for close to 10 years, and before that, for 10 years with SAP. And I also have Mr. Srijit Rajshekaran from SAP today joining us in this webinar. So together we would be taking you through the session today. And just to give a brief before I hand over to Srijit for the overview. So the session is about SAP AFS to SAP HANA Fashion and Vertical Business Data Migration. So we specifically talk about the data migration aspect of an S4HANA implementation, specifically when you have an SAP AFS system already running. Right, and as probably most of you already know, S4HANA Fashion is publicly, or let's say generally available from the past 4 to 5 years now, and a lot of customers have actually moved into S4. Some of you might be in the planning stage, or some of you might thinking of moving to S4HANA, and there is great value add in moving to S4HANA Fashion though, and as I said. SAP sort of looked at the verticalized business to cater to both to retail, manufacturing, wholesale, as well as to provide certain technology capabilities of SAP HANA. And that's when S4HANA Fashion was born, and it's been a good success so far. And to make this sort of, this possible, there was a design change as well as a change in the underlying data structure between AFS and S4HANA, right? So the underlying data structure as well as the document structure got changed. And this sort of would bring in a bit more complexity as well as time. Consumes, let's say, a bit more time when you have to do data migration. To make this a bit more easier, SAP has come out with the AFS to S4HANA data migration cockpit, a direct transfer solution. And that is what we're going to talk about today. But in general, to talk about the move from SAP AFS landscape to an S4HANA Fashion landscape is something that we can talk in a different session. Today, we're going to restrict our session about data migration and how do we do and what is the value it brings. And Srijit will take us through a quick overview of the solution. After that, we'll have a Q&A session. We have sort of listed down a few of the questions that we come across commonly. So we'll go through those questions, and if you have any questions that are outside that, please feel free to put your questions in the chat window, and we'll try to answer as much as possible. If not, we'll definitely get back to you at the end of the session and provide answers to those. So with this, I'd hand it over to Srijit. Srijit probably can do a quick introduction and then take us through the solution.
Sure, Vinod. Thank you. Thank you for that. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, based on the region that you have joined the webinar from. Like Vinod already introduced, I'm Srijit Rajshekaran. I'm a product owner who's responsible for the AFS migration solution that we have built on top of the migration cockpit product in SAP S4HANA. To give you a brief introduction on myself, I have close to 10 years of experience in the IT industry, 7.5 years being in SAP, and 7.5 years of data transformation, to be very specific. Before that, I was with Cognizant. I was basically an ABAPer there doing implementation of SAP products. Yeah. So today, what we will do is I will take you through a brief set of slides which would give you an introduction to what Migration Cockpit is, different solutions available as part of Migration Cockpit, and I will also introduce you to the AFS specific solution that we have, which would cater to the requirement of moving a customer from an SAP AFS solution into S4HANA Fashion and Vertical Business solution. Yeah. So like Vinod already mentioned, these two solutions are very different in nature. You're talking about an AFS solution, which is an add-on on top of an ERP box. It's basically an extension of ERP solution as such, but whereas S4HANA Fashion and Vertical Business is completely retail architecture oriented. So you have new concepts coming in, like articles, variants, merchandising category, material group, and so on. And now you have the leverage of clubbing your manufacturing as well as wholesale domain into a single solution. And that's why it is very beneficial for all of you who are already on AFS to move into S4HANA Fashion and Vertical Business. So this is just a brief introduction before we go into the actual session today, which is Migration Cockpit. I just wanted to set the context so that you understand the need for such a solution and why Migration Cockpit catering to AFS migration was considered the highest priority when compared to other industries. Yeah, so this is just introducing you to that. So let's start with the slides as such. I promise you, it's very few slides. We will directly jump into the more important aspects of answering a question pretty soon in this webinar. Okay, just have to go through the legal disclaimer. Okay, so before we go into a migration cockpit as such, I want to reintroduce you to this slide. I'm sure many of you would have seen this slide across multiple presentations in SAP in various international events like TechEd and DCOM and so on. When a customer is planning to move from their existing legacy system, it may be an SAP system or it may be a non-SAP legacy system. The various approaches available for customer to move into S4HANA is what is mentioned in this particular slide. First one is a system conversion. The system conversion is a scenario where you use the rapid modernization techniques to convert an existing system into an S4HANA system. Yeah. So this is basically done as a project approach, which is specific to each customer, based on the customer system and the behavior of the customer system, and also the modules and components that are there in the customer system. We create a plan to convert the existing system into S4HANA system, yeah, and in over a duration of time. So this is a system conversion scenario. Since all of you are AFS relevant customers here, I want to specify this that for a AFS system, a system conversion is not possible. A system conversion comes into picture when there is a relationship between the data models which are present in your source system as well as your target system. Yeah. So if you're talking about an ERP system, the data models are connected when you're talking about an ERP as well as S4HANA system, and the possibility of converting the existing data in your ERP system into an S4HANA relevant or compatible data, the transformations and the transitions which are involved, can be achieved in a system conversion process. But whereas when you refer to an AFS system, these two systems, AFS and S4HANA Fashion and Vertical Business, are completely different. The architecture is different. The underlying data models are different. Even the modules which are involved are different. Hence, a system conversion is not possible. The only possibility for an AFS customer is the third scenario that you see on the slide, which is new implementation. Before we go into the new implementation, I will also like to introduce you to the selective data transition, which we call as harmonization scenario, where you either decide on clubbing multiple systems together into a single S4HANA system, or you try to perform a selective migration or selective transition from your existing legacy systems to S4HANA system. This is also done with various project-based techniques out there in the market. What we'll focus on today is the new implementation scenario, because this is the only scenario which is possible from an AFS system perspective. A new implementation scenario is something where a customer decides that he no longer wants to use the existing system. Rather, he wants to start using a new system. The motivation here could be a lot of factors, like data cleansing could be one of them. Big customers may be having a lot of data in the source system, but which has been accumulated over the past many years. And now, when you have decided to go into S4HANA system, you do not want to bring in all the historical data, but rather you only want to bring in those company codes which you're currently actively using. Yeah. So this is where we are referring to as new implementation scenario, where you bring in the master data in full into your S4HANA system, and then you choose to bring your transactional data which are open in nature, so that your business continuity can happen from your new system and the old system is no longer used. For the old system, you have multiple options. You could prefer to keep it as it is and sustain the historical data. I understand that from legality and auditing purpose, you need to have this historical data, or you could choose one of the archiving solutions offered by SAP, like BW4 or Data Lake or something, and then have the data for all your reporting as well as auditing purpose. You have your S4HANA system, which is very lean in nature, very clean in nature. You have all the data cleansing, which is performed, and you have a very high performing system available, and you start your business continuity with the new system. That's what we refer to as new implementation scenario. Yeah, so this slide is basically talking about that. And migration cockpit, which we are talking about, which we have been referring to multiple times over the past 5 to 10 minutes, is placed only for the new implementation scenario. Yeah, not just the AFS solution. Migration cockpit has multiple solutions present in it, for AFS, for ERP, for EWM, and so on. All these solutions cater to those customers who want to go in for the new implementation scenario. The reason why I'm emphasizing this is because Migration Cockpit will only take care of migrating the whole of master data plus open transactional data. No historical data is brought into your new system. Yeah. Migration Cockpit is compatible with S4HANA on-prem as well as S4HANA Cloud. You can also use Migration Cockpit to bring data from an SAP source system as well as a non-SAP source system. Now, how we do that, I will show you. Maybe I'll give you a brief introduction on the various approaches which are possible in Migration Cockpit, and it will give you a better idea on how Migration Cockpit can cater to these requirements. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so the possible in Migration Cockpit is using files. Yeah, so this is mainly placed for those customers who are coming in from a non-SAP legacy system, and they now want to move into S4HANA Cloud or on-prem system, and they need a means of bringing in their master data and open transactional data into the S4HANA system for business continuity. Now here, what Migration Cockpit does is it gives you a template file per object basis. So when I'm referring to object here, I'm actually talking about each functional business object. Yeah. So sales order becomes a migration object, which is also a business object. So for sales order, Migration Cockpit, if you want to migrate sales order, Migration Cockpit will provide you a template file. It is your responsibility as a customer to put the data from your legacy system into this template file. Yeah, how you do that is totally up to the customer, up to you basically. You could use SAP data services as one of the options, or you could use any other solution to convert the existing data from your legacy system into a data which is in the format of these files that we provide. Once you put the data into these files, you just have to feed these files to Migration Cockpit. Migration Cockpit will take care of performing all kinds of transformations which are required on this data, along with providing a lot of mapping capabilities to rename your material, to map your company code, to map your sales org, and so on, and then push the data into your S4HANA system and make it usable for you. Yeah. So this is basically the file-based approach, and this is available for both cloud as well as on-prem. And like I said, this is very useful for customers who come in from non-SAP legacy systems, because when you're talking about a non-SAP legacy system, we from SAP will not have information or knowledge on the data models which are present in these third-party systems. Yeah. So for those approaches, this is very, very useful. Now, of course, you could question me and ask me that since most of you will have ABAP knowledge, you can also question me and ask me that there may be a limit on the amount of data a file can hold, right? Because we are uploading that into an ABAP system. At the end of the day, we are uploading it into an S4HANA system. Yeah. Yes, that's true. There is a limit on the file. There may be a scenario where if your source data, let's take sales order for example, if your data for sales order is very humongous in size, then you might have to split that into multiple files and then upload it into Migration Cockpit and then perform individual migration on a file basis. Yeah, each file would have to be migrated individually. Now, to avoid this or to improve this process, Migration Cockpit has a second approach called staging tables. Okay, so here what you do is Migration Cockpit will ask you for a DB connection name. You can give a DBCon name. The DBCon should connect to a HANA DB. It could be your existing S4 HANA system in case you have an on-prem world. In case you have a cloud world, then you need to have an HCP subscription and you give that as the DBCon connection. Or you could also set up another independent S4HANA system, which Migration Cockpit can connect to and use the DB in that particular system. Any of this approach is possible. As long as you give a DBCon connection, Migration Cockpit will take the responsibility of creating something called staging tables in these systems. Now, these staging tables are very similar to the template files which we spoke about in the first approach. The only difference here is there are no files, but rather there are DB tables. And now the responsibility lies with you as a customer to feed the data from your legacy system into these tables. Here, since it's DB table, there is no actual limit from Migration Cockpit side. It depends on how much free space you have in the system, and as much free space you have, you can fill up so much data. Migration Cockpit will take care of reading the data from these tables and then performing the same steps what we discussed in file-based approach. So this is also available for cloud and on-premise solution. Now, coming to the most important aspect from this particular webinar's perspective is the third solution, which we refer to as direct transfer. Now, for those customers who are coming in from a legacy system, it completely makes sense that the customer has to, or you have to go through the trouble of developing a solution which is capable of converting the data from these legacy system into these files or staging tables, which Migration Cockpit can understand. But why should an SAP customer do this? Because we as SAP should be aware of the data models present in the legacy system if it is an SAP system, right? That's where direct transfer comes into place. So if you are an existing SAP customer, like for example, you're an existing SAP AFS customer, then you don't have to do any of this process of filling the tables or filling the files and so on to migrate your data. The only thing that you need to do is you need to access the direct transfer solution of Migration Cockpit, which is the latest offering out there in the market, starting 1909 S4HANA. You just have to provide an RFC name to Migration Cockpit. Migration Cockpit will connect to your source system using the RFC, perform the selection process in an automated way. Yeah. The AFS solution which we are referring to is only part of this third approach. Let me re-emphasize that. If you're planning to use Migration Cockpit for AFS, then you have to go in for the third approach because the standard migration objects and the standard content is only part of the direct transfer solution. Yeah. So let's talk from AFS perspective now, since the webinar is focusing on AFS. You have an AFS system. You have to go to Migration Cockpit. You have to choose AFS template that you want to migrate the AFS data. You need to provide an RFC. Using the RFC, Migration Cockpit will access your AFS system, perform all kinds of selection from the respective data tables, respective data models for each of these objects, like sales order, bring the data into your S4HANA system, perform all kinds of transitions and transformations which are required to make it compatible with S4HANA Fashion and vertical business. Yeah. Here we are talking about very, very complex conversions, like converting a material with grids to articles and variants, which is architecturally completely different. But Migration Cockpit takes care of for performing this activity in an automated way and then writing the data into your S4HANA system. During this process, we still provide you all possible capabilities of providing mappings where you can rename your material. You can club your company codes into a single company code. You can club your sales orgs into a single sales org. You can perform renaming of any of this organizational data and so on. The only challenge being the data should exist in the S4HANA system. The organizational data should already be part of your S4HANA system. So if you're providing a sales org as one of the mapping values, then that particular sales org should already be part of your S4HANA system. This you need to set up. Migration Cockpit will take care of migrating your master data and transactional data, but your customizing data and organizational data will not be migrated by Migration Cockpit. You have to set it up and provide this as a mapping for Migration Cockpit to refer to. Okay. Now this direct transfer solution is only available for on-premise S4HANA right now. It's not available for cloud at present, but we do have it in the roadmap, and then we will see how we reach that particular state. Okay, and the apparels and fashion solution, AFS solution, is only part of your direct transfer. You could definitely use the first two solutions as well, the files and staging table solution also, to migrate your fashion data. The only challenge here is you would have to design the migration objects yourself using the modeler which we provide from scratch. So the direct transfer solution currently has 70 plus objects, which covers most of the AFS content. We will look at it in detail in the next few slides. This content is not part of staging as well as file-based solutions in Migration Cockpit. Okay, so let's move on to maybe just talking about a few facilitators in Migration Cockpit. I covered most of the points in the previous slide itself, but I just want to highlight it again. Migration Cockpit is a product which is very easy to use. Yeah, we already have pre-configured content out of the box objects available. No development skills are required if you're sticking to the standard objects and standard scope. No development skills are required. Every single code which is created in Migration Cockpit is auto generated based on the user configuration. Yeah. It has a step-by-step guidance. The UI is designed in such a way that it helps you understand in a very precise and very unique way on what is the next step to be performed. It provides you a way to create a project, choose your scope, provide your mapping, perform a simulation before the migration is done, fix all your issues which comes up in simulation, and then go in for migration. So it's a very guided approach. The mapping content of what data from source side has to become what in S4HANA side is also completely automated and completely designed and delivered to you as part of the standard content. Yeah. And yes, we do understand that you as a customer will have a lot of custom developments present in your system, and this may be unique to each customer, and you need some means of catering to these Z developments as well. And for that, we provide something called as migration object modeler. Yeah. Let's just go to the next slide. So this is what you have for catering to your Z developments, migration object modeler. What migration object modeler does is every time you create a project and you add, let's again take sales order as an example, you add sales order as a scope of your migration, and in your source side, you may be having some Z fields or Z tables which cater to certain custom development in your landscape. Now you need to somehow migrate that as well into your S4HANA system. Migration object modeler will give you a way to do that. So it creates a standard object, and then it gives you the data model of the standard object. It also gives you the standard API which we use to write the data into the S4HANA system. Now you could tweak it, you could modify it, you could add further tables into the data model, you could provide further mappings into the mapping part to say that my Z field should go into this particular place. You could also write a wrapper API on top of the standard API to cater to certain custom logic that you want to implement. And using migration object modeler, you could use the custom API which you develop to write the data into the S4HANA system instead of using the standard API. All this is possible from migration object modeler. This also comes along with migration cockpit. Now, having said this, I want to emphasize another point. Migration cockpit as well as migration object modeler does not have an additional license. It comes with your S4HANA license. If you have S4HANA license and if you have 1909 version in your landscape, migration cockpit and the modeler is free along with the standard content which is present in this particular product. Okay, I've also highlighted the transaction here. The direct transfer migration cockpit solution is accessed using the Fiori application, using a Fiori launchpad in S4HANA. But to access migration object modeler, you need to go to the backend. It's based on SAP GUI because a lot of configuration and designing is involved. And the transaction for that is LTMOM. Okay. Moving on, yeah, just to provide you a highlight on how Migration Cockpit works. Okay, Migration Cockpit direct transfer solution works because we are focusing primarily on that solution from AFS perspective. It's only available for a source system which is SAP in nature, which is basically AFS in nature. The complete solution is automated. There's no user intervention required, no files involved, no staging tables involved. Only an RFC has to be provided, and everything is taken care by Migration Cockpit in an automated way. The complete migration happens using APIs. Yeah, traditionally there have been migration solutions which do table-to-table migration, but in such cases, the probability of an inconsistency occurring from a functional nature is very high because we are not doing any kind of functional validation. But using this approach, what we are doing is we are fetching the data from respective data models from the source system. But instead of directly putting into certain tables in the S4HANA system by of course, performing a lot of conversions and transformations and so on, what we do is we pass it on to the standard APIs which are available in S4HANA system. Again, to take sales order as an example, we take the data from AFS system. We do all kinds of transitions and transformations along with the conversions which are required in the source system. We also take into consideration the mapping which you're providing to rename certain content. Then we pass the data to the standard API to post the data into S4HANA system. The standard API takes care of all functional validations which are required before creating data in the S4HANA system, returning the error messages to you in a most convenient and appropriate way. Yeah. So for example, if a sales org does not exist in the S4HANA system, if you put directly data into the table, there is no validation happening whether the sales org exists or not. But since we are following the API approach, it will give you an error message saying this particular sales org does not exist in your S4HANA system. So before you proceed with the migration, please fix this issue and then do the migration. This is how an API-based approach is much more convenient and much more accurate. And the probability of an inconsistency occurring using this approach is quite minimum in nature. Okay. So we have 100 plus objects, which is part of this particular solution, migration cockpit direct transfer. There are three main templates available. One is for those customers who want to move from ERP to S4HANA. Second is for AFS customers to move into S4HANA Fashion and vertical business. The reason why we prioritized AFS as one of the top industry customers is because there is no other path available for AFS customers to move into S4HANA. Like I told you in the previous slide, conversion is not possible. Only a new implementation is possible, and the migration of data can be done by a migration cockpit in a very productive and constructive way without much user interference or not as much of effort involved when compared to designing this as a project starting from scratch. Yeah. We also have the EWM template, which is available for migrating data from an extended warehouse management system to decentralized EWM, which is part of your S4HANA system. Okay, I hope you got a better understanding of migration cockpit from this perspective, also from the technical aspect of how we write the data into the S4HANA side. Okay, just to highlight the few steps that happens in migration cockpit, I did cover it a bit in the previous slide, but I just want to provide you an overview of this. First step that you do is select the migration objects. Like I said, we have 70 plus migration objects. You could choose to do the project in a scattered way, or sorry, in a staggered approach. You may choose to migrate some master data first, and then move on to the second set of master data, and then move on to the transaction data, and so on. So you have the flexibility and the feasibility along with the freedom to choose what you want to do at a particular point in time. So you choose the migration objects, which is your first step to do. Second thing is migration cockpit takes care of fetching the data from the legacy system. In case of direct transfer, we do it using RFC. You just have to provide the RFC name. In case of file and staging solutions, then you need to fill the files and then feed the files into migration cockpit, and migration cockpit will read the data from there. All the mapping and transformation data has to be provided by the user. So here is your power to provide mappings as you feel fit. You can rename your materials into a much more readable format or technical format based on the naming conventions that you have designed to be implemented in your S4HANA system. You could also bring in new sales org, new purchase org, and then say respective mappings for it, saying this particular sales org data should go into my this new sales org, which is created in S4HANA system. All these capabilities are possible in the mapping part. Migration Cockpit will take all that into consideration and generate the code which is required around the data which you have provided. And here, if you do not want to provide the mapping, even then it's pretty simple. You just have to click a button saying confirm all, and Migration Cockpit will consider the old value and new value as same. So the effort required from you is minimum. Only if you need to provide such mapping, you need to go modify the value. If you don't need to provide the mapping, you can just confirm the entire thing using a single click. Next step is the simulate feature. This is exactly like mimicking a data transfer. We call the standard APIs, we try to write the data, but we don't perform a commit. The standard APIs will return certain errors to you from a functional perspective, performing all possible validations out there. And then you have an opportunity now to fix those issues and then do the migration. That's the importance of simulation. Migration, like I said, it's using APIs. Most of the functional validations happen here, and then you get a very, very consistent and lean system after this particular process. Finally, this is applicable for both on-premise and cloud systems, but the direct transfer solution and the AFS solution is currently available for only on-prem because fashion and vertical business is only part of your on-prem or the single tenant edition, which is also called extended edition. Their migration cockpit can also be used. Okay. So this is how, if I need to put it in a diagrammatic way, this is how a landscape should look from AFS perspective. You have an ERP system with AFS add-on. You have an S4HANA system with Fashion activated there, which means you need to activate your retail switch and so on, with all the configurations being maintained, like sales org, purchase org, company codes, and so on, plans, distribution centers, etc. You need to have a minimum release of 1909 because Migration Cockpit is only available from 1909. If you have the setup in place, you're free to use Migration Cockpit. Okay, very important slide. Like I said, we have close to 73 plus objects as part of 1909. Here, we have tried to cover everything possible from an AFS perspective. Yeah, we have covered finance data. So the slide which you see here, the first two rows are finance relevant data. Using these migration objects, you will be able to migrate all your finance data from the AFS system into S4HANA system. Then we also have the application platform data, which is some of them are very specific to AFS industry, fashion industry, like grids and sales grid and purchase grid, segmentation values, and so on. This also we cater to, we migrate the data. And then we also cover all other domains which are present, like logistics, product planning, sales and distribution, industry specific content, which is very specific to AFS solution, like distribution curves, seasons, and so on. Now, using these 70 plus objects, you'll be able to migrate your entire wholesale domain as well as manufacturing domain. That's what we have kept in mind while designing these migration objects, and this should cater to those requirements. We are continuously reevaluating these migration objects, and as and when we see that something is missing or some scope has to be increased, we are doing continuous improvements and releasing it as part of many releases across S4HANA on-prem. Okay. Yeah, so finally, maybe a summary slide here. Like I said, we have 70 plus objects as part of 1909, which covers the whole of manufacturing as well as wholesale domain of AFS. Capability to derive complex logic in selection criteria. Okay, I really have to emphasize this again. So Migration Cockpit provides you an opportunity to select the data based on company codes. Yeah. So in the Fiori UI, you can provide company codes which you feel is relevant for migrating to S4HANA system, and Migration Cockpit will take care of fetching only those data with respect to the migration objects for those company codes. But now you can immediately jump in and tell me there are certain data which is not directly relevant to a company code. Yeah, there are a lot of content in the AFS system which cannot be directly reduced based on company code. But here, Migration Cockpit has the intelligence to derive the other organizational data based on the company code. Okay, so you may have, okay, let me take example of a season. A season data is very specific to AFS, and season data comes with a lot of condition records created against it for certain sales organizations. Now, if you want to reduce the season data based on company code, it's not possible because there is no direct relationship between company code and seasons. But then seasons has a relationship with sales org. Migration Cockpit intelligently finds out what are the sales orgs which are referent, which are relevant for the company codes which you have chosen for the migration, and then uses that sales org values to reduce the seasons condition data. And only those condition records will be migrated which have sales org values, which is relevant for the company code. This intelligence is already built in Migration Cockpit, not just with seasons. For any data that you refer to, it automatically derives the other organizational data based on the company codes that you provide. Okay, automated mapping between source and target. Like I said, everything is pre-built. The content is already delivered to you. We have done the hard work. We have done the heavy duty, and we have completely converted the AFS data to S4HANA Fashion and vertical business data. Here I'm referring to converting materials with grid to articles and variants, converting a customer to business partner, and many such aspects. Ability to pre-populate the old values and suggest the new values based on the selection. Yeah, so this is also done in Migration Cockpit. Another point I want to emphasize here is in many of these migration objects, you may prefer to use internal number ranges. Okay, so you may be creating a sales order in the S4HANA system, but your configuration says that I need to use internal number ranges. So a new sales order gets created in the S4HANA system, which is relevant to an existing sales order in the AFS system. But this mapping is also created in Migration Cockpit. So Migration Cockpit has a mapping which says what was your old sales order and what is the new sales order created. And this mapping can also be downloaded in form of an Excel sheet from LT-MOM transaction, which is the modular transaction. This Excel sheet can be kept for your future reference to look back and say that I had a sales order with this value in the source side. Now it has become a new sales order in my S4HANA system, and this is the new value. This is also possible in Migration Cockpit. Yeah, so that brings me to the end of the overview session I had in mind. I hope I did not consume too much time. I really wanted to provide you a brief so that most of the questions that you have in mind would be answered already based on the overview session. But now I would like to hand it back to Vinod to start with the Q&A. Over to you, Vinod.
Thanks, Srijit. Thank you. That was very informative. And just to mention that, I mean, we've been working with Srijit from probably last year when we were part of the partner testing process for the Migration Cockpit. And we have probably tested most of the 70, 72 plus objects that Srijit just mentioned in our internal system. And we had very senior consultants, with the AFS and S4 knowledge who did the testing and provided feedback. And it was very well received from SAP as well. So thanks for that as well, Srijit. We've been working for close to a year now. So that's wonderful. So what we have done is we sort of, listed out some of the questions that we have commonly come across. So we're going to just put that out and then probably take the questions one by one. And if there are any questions that are not there in that list, feel free to type it into the chat window. Okay. So Srijit, let's put out that slide with the questions and could probably.
Sure, Vinod. Yeah.
All right. I think, as you said, some of these questions might have been answered during the presentation, but then we'll just quickly skim through them. Yeah. So the first one is there a separate license needed for this tool, and how is this priced? So Srijit, over to you.
Yeah. So I think I covered this in the presentation. There is no additional license for Migration Cockpit. It comes with your S4HANA system. The only prerequisite is that you need to have 1909 as your release. If you have 1909, Migration Cockpit, along with the standard content for AFS, plus the Migration Object Modeler, comes to you for free.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think the next question is about, the scope of coverage, right, of the data migration cockpit. And I believe this was pretty much answered in the slide deck. So we're going to share the slide deck as well, so you can get a list of all the objects that have been covered. So we'll move on. So next one is, what is the advantage in using an AFS data migration cockpit versus the traditional data conversion, right? So I think that one of the key aspects that I think it was also covered during the presentation is in any data migration project, right? There are a few key aspects. That is the data extraction part of it, as well as the mapping and the transformation. This actually is the heavy lifting part of it. This takes quite a bit of time, and then of course the validations and then the upload of the data into the target system. So with the AFS data migration cockpit, basically the whole extraction and the standard transformation and validations are taken care of, and that saves quite a bit of effort and time. So I think that's one of the biggest advantage. And as I said, because it's a solution from SAP and they understand the data structures on both source and the target, I think it's a lot more efficient and accurate as well. So I think that's for me the bigger advantages: accuracy, efficiency, and of course quite a bit of saving of time. Let's go to the next one. Does this tool do any validations and data cleansing? Srijit, over to you.
Yeah. So this tool, okay, Migration Cockpit as such does not have an automated or an integrated validation and data cleansing a module along with it. But like I said, the reduction criteria is possible. So a customer or many of you would want to migrate only certain company code data in order to cleanse your data which is present in your source side and bring only that relevant company codes to S4HANA system. This is possible for Migration Cockpit. Another thing which is also possible, which will help you to do this cleansing, is modeler, the migration object modeler. Now, along with this reduction criteria at company code level, if you still want to filter data respect to each migration object, for example, sales order. I'm just taking sales order as an example because I'm referring to it from the beginning of the slide. If you want to migrate only certain set of sales order, which is created from a particular date to a particular date, this is also possible by setting a filter criteria at migration object modeler level. At modeler level, you get the freedom of setting this filter criteria at a particular field level in the data model. So you can access the data model and you can say if this particular field satisfies this condition, only then migrate the data. So this way you can bring in a lot of data cleansing activities as well, but an automated approach is not currently possible in Migration Cockpit. Yeah. From a validation perspective, just one more point, Vinod, sorry. From a validation perspective, there is no validation which takes place after the migration process. But during the migration process, since you're using the standard, or since we are using the standard APIs to write the data into S4HANA system, all functional validations will be taken care at that level. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Over to you.
Now, the next one was would the AFS data migration cockpit work for customized fields on a customer's landscape? I think we covered it. Yes, basically, I mean, it's not part of a standard offering, but the tool provides the flexibility to modify a standard object if you need to add certain customized fields or create your own custom objects if the object is completely new, right? Or a separate object, then it can also be modeled within the migration cockpit to be able to do the migration. So it's possible for both custom fields as well as standalone custom objects. Next question, let's say, what is the anticipated timeline saving of using data migration cockpit to a traditional method? Yeah, I think we sort of covered it in the other question. So there is considerable time saving. I don't think it's possible to sort of put a percentage around it. I think it depends on each individual customer setup. But as I mentioned, the heavy lifting of the data extraction and the standard transformation is already taken care by the solution. So that brings in a tremendous amount of saving time as well as effort. So we'll move on to the next one. Does using Cockpit eliminate the need 100% for using files or staging tables? So straight it over to you.
Yeah, so the files and staging tables is still a potential solution for you. The only difference here is you have to design the migration objects from scratch. You have to design each migration object like the 73 ones which we have developed in direct transfer. Only then you will be able to get a template file out of it. And in addition to that, you also have to design a solution which can extract the data from AFS system and put it into these files. But using the direct transfer solution, you can do all this in an automated way. So I would like to say that yes, this direct transfer solution and the AFS migration template, which is part of direct transfer solution, will 100% remove the dependency on file and staging solution unless and until there is some preference that you are providing it to that means of migrating the data, which is outside this particular scope. Yes.
Okay. We'll just take one online question as well, Sri. There's a question about can pricing procedures with all elements like condition types and access sequences be migrated?
Yeah, so again, very good question. This is also taken care of. Everything, the pricing procedure execution, which will happen in the S4HANA system when you migrate a sales order. But all the data which is relevant for a pricing procedure to take place, like the pricing conditions, the sequence, and so on, can be migrated using Migration Cockpit. This is taken care of in the list of migration objects which we shared in the previous slide.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have tested this in our Intel system as well, so it does work. Okay, so we have one more question. When we go to migrate, let's say, transactional data, are the changes done on the original document are also migrated?
Hmm.
It is the original document in SAP AFS.
So here, are we referring to an attachment, or are we referring to the transactional data
I think
itself?
that
That
it's like basically uh, I'm assuming it's probably the versioning or the changes that have happened on a sales order, for example, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So whether the change you have the change management, right? So whether the change
Yeah,
can be transported or migrated or not.
understood. So here, migration cockpit will only migrate, if you take orders as an example, it will only migrate those orders which are completely open in nature. Yeah. Even if you have a single delivery created against the order, that migration that order is not considered for migration, because we call that as a partially delivered order. And if you migrate that particular data into S4HANA system, then the probability of your pricing procedures and the price determination going for a toss is very, very likely. Yeah. So all those orders which are completely open, we cater to bringing in everything revolving around it.
Okay.
That's
And
basically it.
then
Yeah.
probably at the same time, let me again probably we just switch to question number 13. It might be related. That can we do only delta transfer or changes in source system, or it's always a delete and recreate. So basically, if you've already done the transfer after and you still have some data left, right? Or let's say you've done partial data transfer, like for example, vendor for retail business, but you still want to enhance the same vendor with certain parameters. Is that something that is possible to do that, or it's always a delete and recreate?
Yeah, so here there is no straightforward answer. Firstly, 90% of the time it's just create. There is no update possible. But in some cases, an update is possible, which is within a migration object as such. So we know that when we migrate a vendor, there is also data which comes in from credit management. To give you an example, yeah, there is SD relevant credit management data which is assigned to a business partner in S4HANA system. So the migration cockpit object, which does migration of customer, will first migrate the customer, creates the business partner in the S4HANA system, and then takes care of updating the same business partner with respect to credit management, as well as deviating partner, as well as CVI integration content. But once the migration is completed, or if the migration is done outside migration cockpit, like you have an MDG system and the data is coming from an MDG system, and then updating certain data from migration cockpit alone is not possible. That's not supported in migration cockpit.
Okay. And just to let you know, I think we what we have done is I think we also need to be careful in how do we change or even the delete and recreate option, because we've used it for one of the objects in our customer site, right, where we had to delete and recreate because of the changes, and this was possible only because the API was able to take care of that. But I think it
Yeah.
has to be project specific and careful, because if you've already moved in the transaction data, which depends on that master data, then I think this option will not work out. So it will be a bit more project specific setup that we would like to look at. Okay. And
Absolutely.
there's a question on some of the objects, whether they're covered or not, like source list, output conditions, and work centers.
So among them, source list and work center is already covered. Output
Right.
conditions, I'm not sure if it is actually relevant for our migration. I don't see it in our ERP template also, but maybe I can take this as a feedback
Sure.
and evaluate this a little further.
Okay. So we'll cross check and then get back.
Yeah,
Okay.
on the output condition part
Yes, on the output condition. The source list and the work centers are
is already
supported.
part of the migration solution. Yeah.
Sounds good. And I think the questions 9 and 10, so basically the partial data migration for some brands and some plans only. I think you covered that. That's possible, right? It's in the filter, so you could filter based on some of these aspects and then migrate that data. And the simulation part of it, I think we talked about it, where it is possible to simulate and also look at the errors. But I'd still go to question number 11, Srijit, where the tool have reporting capabilities after data mapping and before upload.
Mhm.
What kind of capabilities are there in that area?
Yeah, so there are some points that I want to mention here. First thing is, during the simulation, every error that comes into place is stored in migration cockpit. Yeah, you will be able to always go back into the history of your migration and then have a look at what were the error messages that came into place and how you fixed it. That's one. Second thing is, the data which is present in these migration projects are are sensitive in nature. Yeah, let's be realistic. There are data pertaining to sales order, there are data pertaining to pricing conditions, and so on. And there are certain specific roles which are required for a migration expert to be able to perform these aspects from a migration cockpit perspective. Now, even if a specific role is required to use migration cockpit as such, and that role has to be approved by the security team of the customer, even then, we also provide a feature where you can provide a retention period. So you can say this particular migration project which I've created should only exist in the system for the next 30 days. And for the 30 days, all these logs will be available, all the documentation will be available, the history will be available. But after the 30 days, Migration Cockpit would automatically truncate the entire project and it's not accessible by anybody. So then you lose the historical data. That's the second part. Third part is, like I said, mapping. Now, it becomes very important for a customer to keep a track of what data became what from the source and target side, especially with number ranges, right? You have orders created in the S4HANA side, and then these orders are being recreated. Sorry, you have orders created on the AFS side, and these orders are being recreated in the S4HANA side with a new number. And you need to have a reference saying what is my old number and what is my new number so that your business continuity can happen smoothly, right? This is also done in Migration Cockpit. Migration Cockpit takes care of fetching the data back from S4HANA system once it is created and then save it against the mapping which has the old value. So you'll have an old value, new value mapping, and this can be downloaded from Migration Cockpit in an Excel format using the modeler, which is at SAP GUI level. And this Excel document can be saved for your reference, which will give you um, uh, uh, a way of referring back to what happened during migration and then keep this mapping intact. Yeah, so this is possible in Migration Cockpit. These are the only reporting capabilities which is possible in Migration Cockpit right now.
Right. Thank you. I think we sort of covered all the questions, and I don't see any more question in the chat window. So probably we can close now. Can you move to the next slide? Okay. So first of all, thanks to all of you for joining this session, and I hope it was informative and valuable to each one of you. And special thanks to Srijit for making this happen. So thank you, Srijit, for taking out time to give us a overview and also answer a lot of these questions. And so please do feel free to reach out to us if you need more details on the migration cockpit or in general about how to move from AFS to S4HANA Fashion. So we could actually have more detailed discussions around it. Or if you have any more questions on the migration cockpit itself, so please do reach out to us. As I mentioned, we probably, Attune has done probably the most number of AFS and S4 implementations. And we have been working with SAP doing certain partner testing as well for the tool. So we'll be more than happy to do some one-on-one sessions to go more in detail and discuss with you. So the contacts are on the slide deck, so please feel free to reach out to any of us. So thank you very much, and stay safe and have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It was wonderful connecting with all of you, and I'm always happy to help in any way possible from SAP side. Feel free to reach out to Vinod or me for any support that you need in the future. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Have a wonderful day.